we found out that my mother-in-law had cancer. She passed away a week later. That came as a complete shock. A year after that, her dad died of cancer. The cancer ruptured his carotid artery and he was bleeding to death on his kitchen floor. And then a year after that, my dad passed away. I have told people over and over and over again, if the only thing that I'd ever gotten out of GoBundance was what I got out of that meeting in Florida, it would have been worth 100 times what I paid. In Florida, Jordan said something that completely changed my family. He said, how are your kids doing with this trauma and this grief? My family has worked with a lady. She's a great life coach. You probably ought to reach out to her. Katie's been working with 3 of my oldest kids for 6 months. Their lives have...
You recently had a fairly, I think, significant anniversary in your life. Your father, I believe, passed about 3 years ago as of the time of this recording. My father's still here, and this topic comes up for me quite a bit. What has that changed in you as a man since his passing?
Everything. So there's more there than just that. So his passing, it was 3 years ago on the 15th of October. But leading up to that, so that was in 2020, obviously. 2016, my youngest daughter was born with a serious birth defect. And that began a serious change in our family. She's okay, thankfully, but we spent 6 weeks in the NICU, and then she didn't sleep through the night for 2 years. So you can imagine what that does to psyche. And then now we're in 2018. We found out that my mother-in-law had cancer, and she passed away a week later. And she was my wife's best friend. They walked together every morning. They lived a mile away. We had a tremendous relationship with them. That came as a complete shock. A year after that, her dad died of cancer. And that was especially traumatic for me. We got a call from her sister that she'd found him, the cancer ruptured his carotid artery and he was bleeding to death on his kitchen floor. And I called my brother-in-law, who was a paramedic, and asked if there was anything that could be done. And he let me know where, I don't even know what the medication was, but let me know that if I would give him a certain dose, that it would help him to pass. And ended up giving my father-in-law what amounted to a lethal injection and helping him pass. And then a year after that, my dad passed away. And all of those things completely wrecked me. I had some real PTSD from my father-in-law's experience, and actually had just started some grief counseling and some PTSD kind of therapy the week before my dad passed away. So there's a lot there. And it in every area of my life has been changed 180 degrees.
Wow. Where are you on the recovery from PTSD? Is there a point at which you felt like you got past it, or is it still present for you? Because that's huge. That's traumatic, what you just described.
Yeah. I think there's still more there. So the immediate results of that, were I was dealing with grief. I was having a really hard time functioning at work. And then with my dad passing away, that was really, I hate to even say it, the nail in the coffin. That put me in such a bad place that I told my wife on the day that we were burying my dad that when we got to the cemetery, that I just wanted her to throw me in the grave with him and bury me there, because I didn't want to keep living. And that led to, at the time, I was operating a couple of car dealerships that I owned 60% of. We were doing $16 million a year in sales. And I completely fell apart. I would show up at work, and within an hour or two, I was overwhelmed, dealing with anxiety and depression. And I would get in my truck. I would drive to a state park that's nearby, and I'd crawl in the back of the truck and I'd sleep there pretty much the rest of the day. I had a good friend of mine that mountain biked with me that found me there one day, and I was so embarrassed that I didn't even know what to tell him. I'm tired. And I ended up walking away from that business. I went to my partner and I said, "Hey, I'm really in bad shape and I can't do this anymore. And if you will just draw up the paperwork, I will just sign over my ownership to you. I don't need anything for it. I can't do this anymore." And he realized he couldn't operate without me. And but we still ended up kind of doing the same thing. I used to be really embarrassed about this exit, and that'll play into the story a little bit later. But we took a $16 million a year business with 30,000 Facebook fans, and I found we basically fire sold the assets, and I walked away with about 60 grand in my pocket, and that started a complete life reset.
How serious were you when you said to your wife, "Just put me in the grave with my father"?
I don't think I was ever at a point where I would have killed myself, but I understood really well people that would. That didn't seem very far away, and that scared me. I have 8 kids, Jamie.
Yeah.
Wonderful relationship with my wife. And on the heel of what we had experienced, I didn't want them to experience any more grief or trauma. So I started looking for help. I looked into a month-long mental health retreat that a good friend of mine had gone through and had completely transformed his life. I didn't love that option. And I remember one day I was in my office at home and I wrote down on a note card that there were 3 miracles that I needed God to give me. And I didn't care about anything else. I needed the miracle of happiness. I needed the miracle of prosperity, and I needed the miracle of purpose. And it was within a week of praying about that every day that I had the idea, I would say the inspiration to go and try a flight lesson. I'd never flown before that, but I was always fascinated with aviation and with airplanes. I went to air shows a lot. I took my kids to a park that was right next to the airport, and I would watch the planes take off and land. But I felt like that was something that I should do. And so I went and talked to my wife about it, which was not an easy conversation. Her uncle had been killed in a small plane crash. So me going to her and asking, I'd like to go fly an airplane, was not a small thing. She went and prayed about it and came back, and she said that, God told me that he would hold your life in his hands. I think this is something you got to do. And that first flight, the first discovery flight I took, and anybody that's received a pilot's license knows you go with an instructor. And as soon as the plane lifted off the ground, I felt my world shift. And that was the beginning of recovery for me. I spent about 300 hours in 2021 flying. I went from never having flown an airplane to being a commercially rated pilot. I bought 3 airplanes, started an airplane rental business, and then discovered aviation charity, which really for me accelerated the healing and gave me a really focused purpose for the next year. So 2022, I I donated over 1,000 hours of my time to public outreach and flying for that aviation charity, and joined Gobundance October of 22. And the accelerated recovery and growth from that has been amazing. In fact, Ryan Kennedy's breath work at Oconee was a huge, huge game changer for me. There were a lot of things that I was able to leave behind in that room at Oconee. I'm super grateful.
Can you describe 1 or 2 things you left behind there?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, on the day that my dad died, I can remember in my truck driving back and forth in front of the church that we go to, swearing at God at the top of my lungs. I was so angry. I just couldn't believe that it had happened. And as the rest of me recovered, there was still a lot of anger there. Not a loss of faith or disbelief, but I was just angry. And so I stayed at an Airbnb at Oconee with a group of other guys, and we went through one sheets one of the nights that we were there, and I shared with them that one of the things that I was struggling with is, you'll remember from the movie Forrest Gump, where Lieutenant Dan is like sitting on the top of the boat, just daring God to sink the ship.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I was treating myself, where I thought, well, you've taken my mother-in-law, you've taken my father-in-law, you've taken my dad. I dare you to do this one more time. Go ahead and bring it on. And so, I'd been into CrossFit before. I had done 100-mile bike races. I'd been in super good shape, and I completely let that go. And a big part of that mentally was I was just like, we'll just see what you do with this. And so one of my biggest blocks was around my own physical health was that. And I only discovered this like a few weeks ago, so a lot of this was really fresh. But I shared that with the guys, and they suggested some coaching or whatever, and I'd never done breath work. The very next morning, I'm in that breath work session with Ryan Kennedy, and I left there feeling like I left that behind. Every day since I've been home now, I've either walked or jogged 3 miles. I've started intermittent fasting again. And I just don't feel the same block. And so, my first event with Gobundance was in Florida in February. That was life-changing. This event's been life-changing. I mean, what has happened in my family and myself personally as in being in those events has been transformative.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to 12 of them. And I keep going back. I keep going back for more. And for those listening, if you're not sure, GoBundance is the sponsor of this podcast. GoBundance.com. Check it out. Great community, men, women, and folks that are not quite at that $1 million level yet. I want to go back real quick on the discussion about faith, the Lieutenant Dan moment.
Yeah.
If you were, I'm just thinking through this, your father was a faith-based, from what I could see and tell, mission-focused individual.
Yeah.
You have your faith, obviously. You and your wife have deep ties to your faith. You're a faithful man. In a moment like that, if you were counseling or coaching somebody else, maybe somebody who's listening who's struggling right now, do you just need to go through that, or is that not a healthy expression, in your opinion, of your rage, your sadness, your trauma? What do you say to somebody who might be, in their own way where you were, mad at God, daring him to take them, all of that? Is it just what you need to go through? And is it patience, be on the other side, and you'll get to the other side, have faith, or is there a more healthy way if you had to counsel that person?
Well, I think so. Part of your question talked about, was like, is it good or bad to express it in that way? One of my biggest problems, I feel like, and one of the things I had to overcome was, and I don't know if this was expressly taught growing up, but certainly it was implied that big boys don't cry, and emotions were bad. For me, for my entire life up until this point, emotions got in the way. I didn't let my wife see me cry when all this stuff happened because I was afraid that was weakness. That if I was sad or scared or even just off one day, that was weak, and weak was not attractive. And if I wasn't attractive, she was out. And so, I have coached and counseled with other people. In fact, one of the greatest blessings to come out of all of this is the ability that I have now to connect with people that are going through difficult things, and to be able to sit with them in that place where any expression of that emotion, when we're laying on the floor and Ryan Kennedy's breathwork thing and guys are screaming out, whatever emotions are inside of them, it's not a good or a bad. It's just, we have emotions. It's part of our existence. And that was the only way that I had to let that go. I didn't know how to do it any differently. But that's also been something I've learned. Like it would have been easy to look back and go, man, who gets mad at God and screams and gets mad at God? But, the other part of that is I think God understands that. And It'd be like if one of my kids was hurt and was screaming or yelling or something else, I would never look at them and say, "Hey, that's inappropriate. Keep your mouth shut and you'll get through it." They're hurt, and I was hurt.
Yeah, that's fine. My oldest son gets pretty bad allergies sometimes, and when he's really in it, and just you can see he's frustrated. He's like, "Why did God give me allergies?" And forever, my wife and I would both do something like, "Oh, buddy, there's worse things, right?" Some people would have we would try to like almost, I guess, trying to help him see the other side of it, but at the same time invalidating his emotion to some extent. So
Yeah,
this is the extreme opposite of that. But at one point we say, "Hey, buddy, look, sometimes God's an a-hole." And it was for him, it was like, "Oh, okay." Like it was like, okay, you didn't try to correct in some way, even if it was a polite, nice, we weren't yelling at him
yeah,
ever to like, "Oh, you're thinking about it the wrong way." But it was just like, bud, you got to think of it this way, think of it that way, just trying to get him to change his perspective. But this is the one time, and we've done it since, that we just allowed him to feel that emotion. And what a difference. What a difference just in trust in sharing with us that he
yeah,
has when we validate it versus try to invalidate it. So I think you said a lot of that. I'm the same way. You grew up, big boys don't cry. Same thing. We come from about the same era, right? So
yeah,
our parents raised us a certain way. And yeah, when you get into a room like you were in and you're screaming out and showing emotion, that's not typical for a whatever we are, Gen X, uh,
right.
30 something, 40 something, 50 something year old guy. So I appreciate you sharing that. What's up, Tribe listeners? I want to talk about our sponsor for today's episode, Gobundance, the tribe for healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. It's a tribe I've been a part of for 5 years now, and I keep coming back year after year because of the quality of the connections and interactions that I get and the accountability that I get toward the goals that I'm looking to achieve. Gobundance has meant everything to me. So I'm really, really proud to sit here on the Tribe of Millionaires podcast and tell you a little bit about Gobundance. Here's the thing. Why do you live where you live? Think about it. Why do you live in the neighborhood you live in, or the apartment building you live in, or wherever it might be? Usually people move into a community because of the quality of the neighbors and all of the amenities that are available to them. And then they go about using those amenities and leveraging that community to the best of their ability for growth. They make connections with neighbors, lifelong friendships, things that serve them. We want that for ourselves, for our wives or husbands, and our children. That's what Gobundance is at the next level. Imagine if you're a man moving into a community of other millionaire men that are driven toward being the best versions of themselves as fathers, as husbands, in their health, in their relationships, in their contribution, you name it. That's what Gobundance provides. For me, it's been everything. I get with my Gobundance brothers on a weekly basis and I tell them, this is where I'm trying to go. Things I can't share with the regular folks in my life, my friends, my family that I've known forever. They only know me for who I've been. Gobundance guys, they know me only for who I'm becoming. And when I deviate, when I go off course from being that guy, from taking action toward being that guy, that's when they step in, that's when they hold me accountable, and that's what accelerates my growth. Go to Gobundance.com right now and apply. If you're a millionaire and a man, Gobundance.com. If you're a woman and a millionaire, GobundanceWomen.com. And if you're not quite a millionaire, go to GobundanceEmerge.com and you join me in the community that I've created in partnership with Gobundance to get yourself to that place of being what we call a whole life millionaire. Gobundance.com. You can start there, see everything that we have to offer. It's an incredible community. I can't wait for you to be a part of it. Now, back to the show. The one in all of this, I'm thinking about your wife. So your wife through all of this, I mean, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing this sort of this story where she loses a mother and a father. Father tragically wasn't there. It sounds like you were, so she didn't get to thankfully witness that, or no?
She was there.
She
Yeah,
was there too. So she
yeah,
watches her father go through this like you. Then she loses a father-in-law. Your baby having a birth defect, the NICU, not sleeping for 2, like she's going through all of this too. 8
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
So you're sort of checking out at work. Does that mean that coming home you're bucking up, or is there a burden your wife had to carry through all of this that was above and beyond because of all the trauma that you had suffered and all of the emotion that you were going through?
Yeah, I think I was actually reflecting on that this morning, and so I'm glad that you asked that question. And it's something she and I have talked about a lot. For her, it was worse because not only was it her parents, and honestly, Jamie, until I lost my dad, I thought that I was experiencing the same thing that she was. I thought that I was feeling the same grief. I had no idea until my dad passed away how big a difference there is between losing someone that you love and losing a parent, and especially in my case, a dad that had been a very big part of my life. We were business partners for a long time. Um, in addition to that, her family didn't handle the when her parents died, they didn't handle the estate settlement very well, and so her family blew apart. So she actually lost a relationship with most of her siblings, lost her parents, um, and the only thing I can say there is we've both had to go through our own healing. And I mentioned the event in Florida because I had an experience there with I met Jordan Owens there, and Jordan asked for some of my time at that event, and the last day of the event we're together, and he asked if he could stand in proxy for my dad and allow me to say to my dad the things that I didn't get to say, because when my dad passed away, it was during COVID, so we weren't allowed to be there. And I started to speak and then just completely broke down, and Jordan just wrapped me in a hug, pulled my head down to his shoulder. I was probably dripping snot on his shoulder, and just held me while I cried for like 10 or 15 minutes. And, here I'm in this conference room with 75 other guys. And then at the end of that, he asked if there was anything else I needed to say. I told him no. And he said, well, I think there's some things that your dad needs you to know about yourself. And then proceeded to tell me that he loved me, he was proud of me, that things were going to work out okay. And I got back home and shared that experience with my wife. And she says, I don't think I ever really got to grieve for my mom. And so we just repeated that exercise. I can remember we're sitting on the floor in our bedroom and allowing her to express. And, she sat in my arms and sobbed for like 30 minutes. And these experiences could have really divided us, because she was I wasn't providing for the family. I wasn't leaving, going to work. Like everything in her world changed, and she handled it so remarkably. I just am in awe of her strength, and getting weak and vulnerable with her for the first time after 24 years of marriage through these experiences of healing has been one of the best things for our relationship. Our relationship now is better than it's ever been. I feel like it's accelerating. We're growing together. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm okay. If I'm having a bad day or I feel scared about a business decision or whatever right now, I'm okay sharing that with her and knowing that that's a safe place to be. And she is likewise. There are things like me telling about how we meet and how my version of the story is that for the first time in 24 years, she's been able to say, hey, I don't really like how you portray this. And now we're able to have conversations that we didn't have before. It's been remarkable for our relationship. And again, I think that's a gift that we can give to other couples who are struggling is, it's really easy to lean out of a relationship where you're having a hard time. It's way more difficult to lean in, but you find so much joy and vulnerability there. One of the things that we've learned is just the definition of the word intimacy, which literally means into me see. And so as we've been more intimate with our emotions in that way, we're able to see into each other, understand each other better, and it's been fabulous.
Wow. I want to come back to your marriage, but I want to tie up one thing you said earlier about feeling shame about the exit that you had from the dealerships, the $16 million a year, 30,000 Facebook follower dealerships. You said you pocketed about 60 grand at the end of it. What was the shame that you felt? Why?
Once I was well enough to recognize what I had done, I knew there was a lot more value in that business. And um, it felt like a failure. I don't feel that same way now. This was kind of one of the beginning steps. Um, Also, part of it was when I joined GoBundance. So um, I don't know what everybody else's path to GoBundance is. Mine was literally part of the healing journey. I read Hal Elrod's book, The Miracle Morning Millionaire. That book talked about or mentioned the tribe of millionaires. So I read that book. I couldn't believe that a group like that was even possible. And then went to the website. I applied. Thankfully, we still had enough net worth that I qualified to join. But this was kind of right in the leadership transition. And so, like, the only communication I got from GoBundance was an invoice. I never got a phone call from anyone. I'd never met a member of GoBundance.
No kidding.
And at that point, I was down to about 40 grand in cash. And I'm looking at this invoice of 10 grand and going, this is completely irresponsible. Like, to take 25% of what I've got for my family. And again, my wife's faith in me is so remarkable. I told her what I was dealing with, and she said, you've been looking for something like this for a long time. You found it. We're just going to do it. Things will work out. And so I'll never forget going to my first GoBundance meeting. I was in a full-on panic attack because the only visual image that I had of GoBundance was, man, these guys just flew back from their private island on their private jet. They've got all of life figured out. They're crushing it in every area of life. There's no weakness. And here I'm depressed, dealing with panic attacks. I just burned down a business that I built for 13 years and left with nothing. I don't really know what my next step is. And, I was pretty certain that I was going to show up at the meeting and there was going to be some guy with like a retinal scanner, and he was going to like scan me and just go, "You're a loser," turn around and leave the room. And I'll be forever grateful for the guys that were in that room. Aaron Velke, Danny Hodges, Jake Garcia, Chad Kilpatrick. A lot of these guys that are some I consider to be some of my best friends now. But I sat down with Jake and he's like, "Man, I'm a recovering cocaine addict. Like, you belong here. You're good. And we'll figure out the rest of the stuff." And that's been 100% true.
Wow, man, that's incredible. I didn't know. First off, the blind faith. So this brings me back to your wife, which is the other
Yeah.
question I wanted to ask. So you're 25 years coming up, 3 months from now, I think.
25 years in January. Yeah.
25 years in January. You mentioned that recently you've been vulnerable with her, which changes your marriage. And I got to believe over the course of 25 years, there are multiple times where I always say, like, the version of the marriage you have has to die so that a new one can be born. You have kids,
Yeah.
you have a second kid, you have 6 kids, you have 8 kids, right? Like, those are all your different people at each of these levels. And then going through the traumas that you went through, the loss that you've gone through with both of her parents and then your father, what you went through with your daughter, all of that. But you keep mentioning going back to this faith that she had in you. So the question I want to ask first is, what are some of the things that you believe have kept your marriage strong over 25 years? What are some things somebody listening can take away? What keeps a marriage like yours, where you weren't vulnerable until recently, right? But still, the ability for it to stay strong for 25 years, nearly.
Yeah. Great question. I think there's certainly things that we've learned along the way, but some of the things that have always been true is each of us, I think, has always been as concerned or more concerned about the welfare of the other person than we have been for ourselves. And so even though maybe I wasn't Mr. Vulnerable, um, she knew that she never had to worry about paying the mortgage, or that I was going to take care of that. And we were, family has always been a priority. Our relationship has already been a priority. So we do a weekly date night now with young kids and stuff. Sometimes that was, simply just sitting out on the porch or something while the kids were inside, but we always made time for each other one-on-one. One of the things that we've done that I've loved is we're doing it more frequently now, but as soon as we were able to, with the young kids, taking at least an annual trip where it was just she and I. Now that happens about quarterly, where we'll take usually like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and go away. It doesn't have to be, sometimes it's just locally. We'll just find a hotel locally, and that gives us a chance to work on our relationship. The last couple of years, and again, this is where like there's this yin and yang in life that happens. She lost her best friend and her mom, and I knew that I couldn't step into those shoes, but they walked together every morning. That's where my wife got a chance to talk. So instead of going to the gym, instead of doing CrossFit or mountain biking, we walk together every morning. And so we've got a solid hour every single morning of every day where we get to connect and talk through life and share what's good, what's bad, what's hard, what's funny. And so those are, I guess, some of the high points. Is you have to, it's just like with a business or anything else, you've got to spend time on what matters to you. And so being really, really intentional about, we're going to get away together. We're going to spend time together each day, one-on-one. And I'm learning other things. Like part of being vulnerable was throughout our marriage, I might think about her during the day, but I didn't send her a text message and let her know that. And now I'm trying to be really active on that. I'm still not great at it, but just little things like that let her know that as I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I'm out in a Coney or I'm in San Diego or whatever it is that I'm doing, I haven't forgotten that she's still here holding down the fort, because she really has been the rock in that sense.
No doubt. Her faith in you, I'm sure, always comes back in a positive way, in yours and hers. I'm wondering about the 40,000 down to 30,000 now. Essentially, you join GoBundance, you take a big leap, quarter of your net worth, or quarter of your, not net worth, of your cash is gone. Yeah. How has that worked out? How is her faith in you doing that? What's happened since then?
Well, at first it wasn't going really well. So I was in LA for a charitable event for Angel Flight West that we'll talk about later, I'm sure, and got a text message from her that our checking account was overdrawn. We were out of money. And I was like, well, we've got some properties that we're working on. I'd started trying to do some fix and flips at the time. It was only, maybe the next day or 2 days after that we got notification that one of the houses we've been working on sold, and that was going to bring in like $70,000. This year has been fantastic, miraculously so. I think we'll wrap up the year earning somewhere around $400,000 from, and a lot of that has been connections with not direct partnerships with guys in GoBundance, but just encouragement, her faith and belief. I started flipping houses, which I'd never done before. And that can be a really interesting experience. You can lose a lot, but
sure.
I've been very fortunate there that those things have gone well, even in the market we've been in. And now we're in a partnership with one of the guys in my pod doing ADUs in San Diego. And the goal for next year is $1 million. So, her faith is paying huge dividends.
Incredible. What a story, man. What a story. I didn't know obviously all of those details. Before I ask about the aviation work that you're doing in the charity, you did something that I've been putting off. You had your father sit down and record stories of his life, how he became, I think, a faith-based or Christian individual, the mission he has for his life, how he met your mom. Yeah. What precipitated that? When did that happen? Why'd you do that? Just give me a little backstory on that. What made that happen?
I wish I'd done more of it. Honestly, and that's counsel that I would give to anybody, whether or not your parents are sick, but all of us, our parents are going to be in their 60s or 70s, and there's only so many more heartbeats that are left there, right? So my dad, when he was 49, was diagnosed with a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is known as one of the most painful human conditions. They call it the suicide disease. Most people will kill themselves because of the pain that they experience. So I watched him for the last 17 years of his life deal with an unbelievable amount of pain. And actually almost exactly 5 years before he passed away, I had sat down with him. I said, "Hey, Dad, where do you see us? Where do you see our business? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And his response was, "I don't think I'll be around." And so the very next morning, I wrote him a letter, and I just said, "Hey, given that that's how you're feeling, I've got the business under control. You're retired now. Welcome to retirement. Now your job is to be grandpa. I want you to play with my kids. If you're not going to be here, I don't care how many cars you help me sell or how you can help me balance the books at the business, or, none of that stuff matters. Let's figure out what being grandpa looks like. And it was hard for him because he was in and out of the hospital a lot with what he was dealing with. But that was some of it. And honestly, one of the biggest regrets that I have is, and it wasn't intentional, but I was so afraid of losing him after that conversation that I began checking out a little bit from that relationship emotionally. I didn't do a lot of deep dives with him on, he helped me start my first business when I was 22 years old, doing a restaurant. I had no experience in the restaurant industry, and he helped me start a restaurant from the ground up. And I never asked him why he made that decision. What were the factors that influenced that decision? There are a lot of questions that I didn't ask. I'm really glad for the ones that we did. And so honestly, to answer your question, really, those were a lot of things that he did. He started writing letters to us before he passed away. And fortunately, we were able to record some of those things of him sharing about his life. But there's so much more that we could have done if I had been able to, I think.
Yeah.
I would do it differently now. My mom is still living, and we're trying to encourage her to share stories and trying to capture more of those moments. So yeah, I would do it differently.
I'm giggling a little bit because your mom, from what I saw, reminds me of my mom. Your father couldn't get a word in. Everything was corrected.
She's she is a fireball. Yeah, my mom is a fireball.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I'm like, God, that's my mother. My father can't finish a sentence without it being corrected or redirected. Like, well, it wasn't quite that way. No, 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 it was this, it was that. So I heard that in the background, and I
Yeah,
kind of laughed a little bit. So that
you
was
you've
cool.
nailed it. Yeah.
That was cool. That was neat. All right, tell me about this the mission that you have. You said you dedicated 1,000 hours. What exactly are you doing? What's this charity work you're doing while flying?
Yeah. So I discovered Angel Flight West. At once, aviation did so much to change my life. I thought, man, there's got to be ways to use this thing that I love to help other people. So I just started Googling aviation charities. I didn't even know it was a thing before, and came across an organization called Angel Flight West. And Angel Flight West was started 40 years ago. This year we'll complete our 100,000th flight. We've helped over 20,000 people in those 40 years. We have about 2,000 volunteer pilots in the 13 Western states that use their personal aircraft, donate their time, donate the entire cost of the flight to help people in need of non-emergency medical care to get where they need to go. The very best example of that, my very first flight, was a young man. He was 18 years old at the time. His name's Bradley. When he was 15, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he lived about 5 to 6 hours from the Children's Hospital in Phoenix. And so 3 times a week, his single mom would drive 5.5 hours in the morning to get him to his appointment, then drive back home because he had two other siblings at home. Imagine the toll that takes on a single mom's finances. Imagine emotionally, physically, how that family is doing. My flight with Bradley is an hour and 15 minutes. So I can pick him up at 7:30 in the morning, have him to his 9 a.m. appointment, and then get him back home before dinner time. It absolutely changes people's lives. And so our primary mission is not emergency medical flights. And like I said, there's no cost to that. There's no cost to the hospital. There's no cost to the patients. Last year, our volunteer pilots donated over $8 million in like-kind donations, and the charity operated on a $2 million budget. It's the only charity that I'm aware of where you get a 4X return on every dollar that you invest in that charity.
Wow.
Not only that, but we do flights for active and retired military. In fact, in Oconee, I spoke with the guys from aerial recovery to see if there wasn't some collaboration where we can help in their mobilizations to get their people where we need to go. So I'm excited for that conversation. We do flights, for example. If you have a loved one who's passing away or receiving care and it's difficult for you to make the travel, we'll fly caregivers back and forth to help their family members out. We do relocation flights for victims of domestic violence and abuse, so we can get them up to 1,000 miles away from whoever's persecuting them. And then we also fly missions in support of other natural disasters, like, if a hurricane comes through, for example, maybe the big airport is shut down, but I can land my plane on about 1,500 feet of runway, so I can pick out a road that's undamaged or something and fly in water and other supplies. So yeah, that's Angel Flight West, and I asked them as soon as I started flying, who's doing public outreach for you in Arizona, and they didn't have anybody, so I raised my hand. So I've been on lots of different stages now talking about Angel Flight West. Got another conference coming up next week where that's what I'm talking about. Actually, just yesterday, Jamie, Angel Flight reached out and gave me the wing lead for Angel Flight West in Arizona. So I'm now leading the 200 volunteer pilots that we have here and trying to grow the organization.
That's incredible. And at the same time, it feels to me, just thinking of your story and talking through it, even just personally, like to sit in a plane a couple times a week or however frequently with a young man that's suffering with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and the whole story around that, with the single mom and everything, to fly victims of domestic violence, 1,000 miles away. Given that you've gone through what you've gone through, you've had PTSD. I mean, you witnessed something absolutely terrible with somebody that you loved.
Yeah.
Does it ever play with you, your emotions, your mindset? Does it ever drag you down, having to be around heavy stories like that when you've had some heavy stories in your recent past?
No, actually, quite the opposite. So
Interesting.
one of my greatest desires as I got better was to turn around and go back and find other people that were still suffering, recognizing that even just somebody being aware that you're hurting can make a huge difference. And so I find that it's been a superpower, actually, because I understand what cancer does to a family. I know what the end of that looks like from multiple experiences. I think I can sympathize. I can sympathize with parents that have a child in the hospital that are dealing with something very difficult. So I have an ability to connect with people that's very different than if you hadn't gone through those experiences.
Sure.
And then the other thing, you get in your airplane with, I didn't know this when I went to pick him up, but when I was picking up Bradley, he was going to find out if there were any more options for treatment or if this was the last one. You get in your airplane with somebody that's dealing with that kind of life situation, it's impossible for you to have another bad day. I don't think I have bad days anymore, Jamie. Because I have perspective. I know for me what bad looks like, and I've never been close to that, not since the burial of my dad. And I know what bad looks like for other people. And all of those things put in perspective, I have a really freaking good life.
Wow, man. Wow, that's a mic drop moment. On that, we're going to convert over to the member questions. With that, what a story. Incredible. But let's dive into these member questions. So we have 6 pillars in Gobundance: bucket list adventure, horizontal income, age-defying health, genuine contribution, authentic relationships, and extreme accountability. And which one of those 6 are you currently crushing it?
Yeah, definitely in the giving and spirituality. And I'm glad that that's where I'm winning right now, but that's where I feel like I'm crushing it.
No doubt, man. I was going to say, if you didn't say that, I was going to say it for you. So that makes a lot of sense. Which one of those might you need more support or accountability?
Yeah, up until last week, I would have said physical health. I feel like that's on the right track, and Aaron Osgood is my accountability buddy there. So every morning I text him when I get done with my run. He's also a pilot, and so I'm appreciative. I was really resistant to any kind of accountability, honestly, going into that event, and I've got a new perspective on that, and so I'm excited. I think So that's probably still the one where I'm struggling the most, but also I think where I'm making the most improvement right now.
Why resistant on accountability going into the event? Unpack that a bit.
I guess because I'd never done it. So most of my career, all of my life, I didn't have a network, and so I was like, man, if I can't do it myself, there ain't nobody in the world that's going to be able to make me do it or force me to do it, or even if they're going to call me and say you didn't do it today, like my attitude would have just been like, well, screw you, I'm still not going to do it. I didn't do it. Nothing you say is going to make me feel any worse about it. And I think that was part of the, maybe it's the lone wolf. I don't know, but maybe that's another part of me that died in Coney. And the next version of me, I really feel welcoming to that now and excited to embrace that and see what happens.
Yeah, I think knowing who is applying the quote unquote accountability helps. When you go, I always say the reason why events are so good, no matter what event it is, GoBundance or otherwise, is that it's immersive. You can't escape. It's not like you get on a Zoom call, then you hang up, and there's your 8 kids. Like you have to stay in it. So you go through an emotional experience like the breath work, and then everybody's still there, and you're still part of it. You might check in with the wife, but the majority of what is right where you are. So as you start to bond and grow, I think accountability takes on a different connotation. At least that's what I've learned. It goes from, like you said, I'm the same way. Like, tell me what to do, and I'm going to do the exact opposite. If you
Yeah.
tell me you got to do this, I'll be like, screw you. No, I do it my way, right? But when accountability takes on a connotation of sort of love, of help, of I want the best for you, just like you want the best for you, I think that only comes when you build that personal relationship. So, and I think events are the best way to do that, just because you get that 3-dimensional touch with other people. So makes a lot of sense, man. I appreciate you sharing that. What is one area of your life where you're potentially flirting with disaster?
Yeah. So the biggest thing on the radar right now is, I just told you what I'd earned flipping houses. I'm so confident in this ADU investment business that we're doing in San Diego that I've shut that down in Arizona. I'm 100% focused on what we're doing there. Um, and yeah, there's the potential that I'm wrong. I guess I don't see that potential. I spent 6 months analyzing it for that and feel super confident not only in the track record that Christian's got going on out there, but also other guys like Alvin and Shiraz and other GoPros that are in that ADU space. But yeah, that has the potential, and that was another leap of faith. I burned the boats. For me, the concept of cutting out things that don't serve you is pretty familiar because I just chopped off everything that was my only income for the last year. So I'm excited for that ride, but there's, part of that roller coaster, there's going to be a little bit of terror along the way too.
Yeah. Oh, always is. But you grow from it. So love that. All right. In what specific way, and you've shared a few, but in what specific way has GoBundance impacted your life? Any story you want to share on that you haven't already?
So in a couple of weeks, I'm going back to Florida for that event. And as I've thought about the transformation that's happened there, here are some thoughts that have come. Is when I went to Florida the first time, I had some friends, but not any brothers. I left there with some brothers, the guys that I knew had my back and loved me. I went with some net worth, but not any self worth. And I came out with a whole lot of self worth, super grateful. Mike Duffy was a huge part of that. Um, I'd already mentioned Jordan Owens. Adrian Akai was at that table. So I left with a lot of self worth. Income wise, I 4x'd the first year in GoBundance. I'm trying to do 2 times what that was. So on that level, it's been huge. In fact, if my vision board behind me, if you looked at the conversation I was having today, like the first 8 names on that list were all GoPros. So it is, but you know what? That is powerful. I'll tell you what's the most powerful is in Florida. Jordan said something that completely changed my family. He said, how are your kids doing with this trauma and this grief? I said, I think they're doing okay. He goes, I bet that they're not. He goes, my family has worked with a lady that she's a great life coach. You probably ought to reach out to her. Her name's Katie. Katie's been working with 3 of my oldest kids for 6 months. Their lives have exponentially improved. Emotionally, mentally, our relationship with them is better. I have told people over and over and over again, if the only thing that I'd ever gotten out of GoBundance was what I got out of that meeting in Florida, it would have been worth 100 times what I paid. My 2 of my older kids now are in really great relationships and moving towards engagement and being married themselves. That wouldn't have happened 6 months ago. They were still struggling. My 15-year-old daughter, 15-year-old for girls is terrible anyway, but the kind of conversations that we're able to have with her around the grief and the anger and the trauma that she experienced has completely changed our relationship. It's changed her outlook. It's changed her friendships. I am so freaking grateful for what GoBundance has done for my kids.
Wow.
It's changed me. It's the best thing, one of the best things that's ever happened to me, maybe outside my marriage and my faith, but it's in the top 3. And what it's done for my kids is just, I can't even describe how wonderful that's been.
I can feel it. I can feel it coming through this screen. What, if you don't mind me asking this, what was it that you thought and what was it that you learned was true with, I think you said Katie working with your kids? I could tell it was emotional, but what was the shift? What was it that you learned or they learned through this process that you were unaware of?
Well, my kids were doing the same thing that I was doing initially, was trying to hide the hurt, and weren't being vulnerable with us. I would ask how they're doing and we would try and check in. And they would give the same response that I would give people when I was at my worst. How are you doing? Oh, I'm okay. It's hard, but I'm doing okay. I think having somebody else who wasn't a parent, who they felt was a safe space and with her training and experience, her ability to dig in and really find where the pain points were has been amazing. So I think just giving them, I think we all want to feel safe before we can feel vulnerable. And so I think they felt safe. I think that, and this actually prompts some good questions for me to have with some of my kids later, is I think that beforehand, they maybe didn't want, maybe they were concerned about what judgment sounds wrong, because I don't feel like I judge my kids, but maybe they were afraid of disappointing us by, like, if their life wasn't all aces, if they were struggling in some area, they didn't want to show that. And I think as a family, we're much better about that now, is being able to have those difficult conversations.
Amazing.
I would, man, if you have teenagers, make the investment. What, $500 a month, $600 a month, you can hire a life coach. Wow. You want to solve teenage problems? Yeah, go hire them a life coach and watch what happens.
That is inspiring, man. I'm not there yet. We're thankfully a few years away. but you can and you know this, you have like 2 basketball teams worth of kids. You can already see early in their last 6, 7, 8 years old, you can get a sense of what they could struggle with or what they might, have a tough time with as they grow and go through puberty and get into that age, into those teenage years. So
You just have to look in the mirror to know what that's going to be.
100%, man. It's crazy, right? Like my wife and I talk about it. Like my oldest and I see the anxieties, I guess I would say, that he has, and I share those, man. When I was his age, like it's not like I can understand it. It's like, no,
Right.
that was me. Like same anxieties, like the fear of losing us is one of those. I had that same fear of losing my parents for some reason. Just you learn about death at that age, and it really does kind of mess with you. And then my wife can see in our younger one a little bit of her, So it's funny to see. I see a little of me in him as well, but the older one especially. Maybe it's his age. It's like, wow, it's a mirror. To your point, it's insane.
Yeah.
So I could see how life coaching,
Things
especially
come out of their mouth, and you're like, "Oh crud, I put that there." That was me.
100%. 100%. So, wow. Okay. What advice would you give to a new or prospective member of a GoBundance community?
For a new member, I would say lean in. There is so much lean in and figure out what you can give to the group. One of my biggest challenges initially was, what do I have to offer these guys? Like, I was at my one of the lowest points of my life, and really the only thing that I felt like I had to offer was I was generously giving and contributing outside of myself. And I just really leaned into what I could give at that point. You're going to sit at a table with guys who can give so much to you. That's easy to figure out. Uh, but you don't want to be the guy at the table that is just there to receive. You figure out what unique talent, ability, superpower you have, and lean into that, because somebody else is looking for somebody that has that. They're looking for the answers that you can give. So that would be for new members. Potential members, I doubt there's too many potential members that are putting down 25% of all the cash they have in the world and rolling the dice on this thing. But it'll be the best bet that you make if you are in that position. It has been for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I don't know if I would have had the stones to do it, but I just love. I mean, the narrative on you, the storyline on you is, man, like lean into faith, and it's
Yeah.
inspiring, man. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right, let's dive into the GoBundance card game question. It is the 7 of hearts. What's something that you don't give yourself enough credit for?
Oh, something I don't give myself enough credit for. Um, Success. I would say that um,
How do you
it's
define it?
really,
How do you define success for you?
I that is an awesome question, especially because you asked it today. I'll tell you how I define it now is this. Um, and bear with me while I pull it up, because I just wrote it down today. Success is not the key to happiness. Self love is the key to happiness, and happiness is the key to success. One of the greatest lessons that I've learned in the last 6 months is how to love myself, and how doing that influences every other part of my life. Um, I'm way better at that now. So I would say, like, what I don't, I'm maybe more hesitant to give myself credit for the progress that I've made and the growth that I've experienced. Maybe that's because I can see who I want to be, and I measure that distance rather than looking back. And that's where my pod has been awesome. And you sit down with those guys, and they're just constantly reminding you of the progress that you're making, which is great. So maybe we all do that, where you don't pat yourself enough on the back at the end of the day. You just put your head down and do the next day. But that's one of the things, looking up and just being grateful for yourself every now and then.
100%. Wow, man. Incredible. I appreciate you opening up. I mean, right from the jump, what an incredible story. Where can people learn more about your mission, your charity? What website you want to direct them to? Where can people go?
Yeah, thank you. Angelflightwest.org is, if you, and we're the only air charity that operates nationwide. I just happen to work with a chapter that represent the Western states. So anywhere in the U.S., if you have a family member, loved one, yourself that's traveling for cancer treatment, maybe you're a burn survivor, maybe domestic violence, maybe you're a military vet, whatever that is, there are guys like me that want the opportunity to give you the gift of flight. And you just reach out to them. Angelflightwest.org. It's super easy to sign up. Once you sign up, you've got a portal where you can just schedule your own flights. There's no limit on the number of flights. There's people we've been flying for 20 years, and we've done thousands of flights for them. So we just want to keep helping that way. So angelflightwest.org is how you find that charity. You can find me on social. I think it's the Alan Underwood, on Instagram, Facebook. I think LinkedIn is the same. That's where you can find me. Pretty easy to find.
Amazing. Appreciate you doing this, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been a lot of fun.